I thought I was an RPG fan. Turns out, I had no idea what I actually liked. And if you think you do, you might be wrong too. Because on paper, my taste in games should be simple. I love RPGs, I usually don't care much for shooters. Except that is not actually true. Because Mass Effect breaks that rule completely. It is absolutely a shooter, and yet it works for me way better than most shooters ever do. And then on the flip side, not every RPG works for me either. Skyrim is one of the biggest examples. Gave me too much freedom. Instead of feeling immersed, I felt weirdly stuck. Like the game handed me this giant fantasy world, and instead of getting pulled in, I froze. So clearly this wasn't just RPGs good, shooters bad. And once I realized that, I had a bigger question. If genre was not the real answer, then what was? So I stopped trusting the easy answer, because people just like what they like is technically true, but it doesn't really explain anything. It does not explain why one shooter pushes me away and another pulls me in because of story. It does not explain why one RPG pulls me in and another pushes me away because it gives me too much freedom. So I wanted something deeper than that. And I had a feeling this was not just a me thing. So I asked my community what genres they like and why. And the answers got interesting fast. Some people talked about challenge, some talked about immersion, some wanted freedom, others wanted structure, and some just really cared about the story. And that was the moment it started clicking for me. People were not really describing genres, they were describing experiences. And once I saw that, I knew I had to stop guessing and start looking into actual ideas that could explain this. The first one that really clicked for me was flow. Flow was the first idea that made this feel less random for me. Flow, the way this guy described it, is the state where you get so locked into what you are doing that the outside world fades for a while. Time feels different, your focus narrows, you're not fighting the experience, you are inside it. And flow is more likely when a task is clear, focused, manageable, and gives you quick feedback. Later, game research built on that too, with ideas like game flow, which talks about focus, challenge, control, clear goals, feedback, and immersion. That hit me immediately, because when I think about the games that really pull me in, a lot of them do exactly that. They give me a clear goal, they let me focus, they show me that what I'm doing matters. They give me enough control to stay engaged and enough structure to keep me moving. And once that happens, the game stops feeling like something I'm trying to enjoy and starts feeling like somewhere I disappeared into. A good recent example for me is Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. When I blow up an RDA base and the land heals, that feels really good on a deep level. Not just because I finished an objective, but because the game world reacts. The land heals. Something changed because of me. That is exactly the kind of feedback loop my brain seems to love. So flow explains something important. Maybe I'm not just drawn to certain genres. Maybe I'm drawn to games that make it easier for me to lock in. But that was still not enough. Because if flow was the whole answer, a lot more shooters should work for me than they actually do. That is where story started to matter. Because when a game gives me a strong story, characters I care about, or a world that reacts to what I do, the mechanics stop feeling like random tasks. They become part of something bigger. That is a huge difference. There is research backing that up too. Some game studies argue that story deepens engagement because it gives your actions context, emotional meaning, and a reason to care. In a lot of shooters, that action can feel disconnected. You aim, fire, clear enemies, finish the mission, and then do it again. And if that is all the game is asking me to care about, I usually lose interest. But the moment story gets involved, the whole thing changes. Mass Effect 2 is probably the biggest exception for me. To this day, I still think it is the best game I ever played. And yeah, technically it is a shooter. You aim, fire, take cover, use powers, all of that. But when I think about why I love that game, I'm not thinking about the shooting mechanics. I'm thinking about building loyalty with my companions. I'm thinking about preparing for the suicide mission. I'm thinking about the fact that when I finally go through the Omega 4 relay, whatever happens over there depends on how much preparation I made beforehand. Who survives is not just about how well I shoot. It is about whether I built the team well, whether I earned their trust, whether I actually cared enough to prepare. That changes everything for me, because now the shooting is not just a mechanic. It is carrying the weight of story, preparation, and consequence. But even that did not fully explain it, because story was not the only thing I cared about. I also cared about who the game let me be. This is where identity came into play. Some games feel satisfying because they let you do things. Other games feel satisfying because they let you be someone. And for me, that difference matters a lot. Research on player identification points in the same direction. Studies have found that how players connect to a character can shape how much they enjoy the game. Part of why certain RPGs work so well for me is that they do not just offer progression or story. They offer identity. They let me step into a role that feels rich, specific, and emotionally charged. And one thing that I've noticed in my own taste is that I'm often drawn to characters of noble birth. And if not noble birth, then having some kind of status or legacy in the game world. There is something really satisfying about stepping into a game where your character doesn't feel random. They belong. They have history. Their existence means something before you even take your first big decision. That changes how I relate to the whole experience. And what makes this even more interesting is that it doesn't only work for me when the character is a blank slate, because The Witcher 3 is a prime example of how a game with a fixed protagonist can still feel amazing. Geralt has his own voice, his own personality, his own history, and his own relationships. He is not waiting for me to invent him. He already exists. But that did not make the experience weaker for me. If anything, it created a different kind of satisfaction. Because by making choices as Geralt, I was not projecting myself into an empty shell. I was getting to know him better. I was shaping the version of him I experienced. And that taught me something too. It is not enough for a game to give me a role. It also has to give that role enough shape to move through. And that is where freedom started getting more complicated. One of the clearest patterns in my own tastes is that freedom doesn't automatically mean a good thing for me. At least not in the way people usually talk about it. There is this common idea that the more open a game is, the better. More choice, more possibility, more freedom, more immersion. But for me, too much freedom can do the opposite. It can break momentum. It can make the experience feel vague instead of alive. And sometimes it can give me so many options that I stop moving at all. That is basically what happened to me with Skyrim. Skyrim is the kind of game people talk about as the ultimate sandbox. You can go anywhere, become anyone, follow 100 different threads, ignore the main storyline, join guilds, wander caves, build your own path. And I can absolutely see why that feels magical to so many people. But for me, that level of openness turned into paralysis. Instead of feeling immersed, I felt confused. Instead of feeling free, I felt like the game handed me this enormous world and then stepped back so far that I lost the thread of why I was doing anything at all. And there is research that makes this feel less random too. Self-determination theory in games say autonomy matters, but that is not the same thing as unlimited freedom with no support. And outside games, research on choice overload shows that more options can sometimes freeze someone instead of helping them. And that is why I reacted so differently to Starfield. Because Starfield is also a sandbox. It also gives you a huge space to explore, lots of optional content, different quest lines, different directions you can go. On paper, it should trigger the same problem. But for me, it didn't in the same way. And I think part of the reason is that Starfield gave me a better sense of structure. It gave me enough direction, enough framing, and enough momentum that I could actually keep moving through it instead of freezing in front of possibility. I did not feel paralyzed by the openness. I felt like the openness was sitting inside a structure I could follow. And that made a huge difference because it meant I could actually finish it. And I did, multiple times. At that point, the pattern finally started coming together. So after digging through all of this, I don't think the real answer is that I love RPGs and hate shooters. That is too simple. What I think I actually respond to is a mix of things that some games deliver better than others, no matter what genre they belong to. I seem to connect most strongly with games that help me enter flow, games with enough clarity, feedback, and control to let me really lock in. I care a lot about meaning. Not just what I'm doing mechanically, but whether the game gives those actions context, consequence, and emotional weight. I am drawn to identity, to games that let me inhabit a role that feels rich and meaningful. And I clearly do better with structure than total openness. I like freedom, but I seem to need that freedom to exist inside some kind of shape. And once I looked at my taste through that lens, The contradiction started making a lot more sense. A lot of RPGs work for me because they naturally bundle some of those things together. They tend to offer identity, progression, world building, consequence, and a strong sense that I'm moving through something meaningful. They do not just give me mechanics. They give me a place to be. But Skyrim helped me realize that even that is not the full story. Because if an RPG gives me too much freedom and not enough structure, I do not necessarily feel more immersed. I can feel less immersed. And on the other side, most shooters tend to miss some of those things for me. But Mass Effect 2 makes sense now too, because it does not just ask me to shoot. It gives me story, relationships, consequence, roleplay, and identity. It gives the combat a purpose I actually care about. So I do not think I am really attached to genres as much as I thought I was. I think I am attached to certain kinds of experiences. And once I saw that, the question changed. It was not really what genre do I like. It was what kind of experience I am actually looking for. So in the end, I do not think we simply love or hate video game genres as simply as we think we do. I think we are responding to something deeper. The kinds of experiences a game creates, the kind of focus it demands, the kind of meaning it gives our actions, the kind of role it lets us inhabit, the kind of structure or freedom it gives us to move through its world. That is why I can love one RPG and feel completely disconnected from another. It is why a shooter usually pushes me away until something like Mass Effect wraps that combat and enough identity, story, and consequence to make me care. And it is why a game can look perfect for me on paper, but still fall apart when it stops giving me the kind of experience I'm actually looking for. So maybe the real question was never why do I love RPGs and hate shooters? Maybe the real question was what do I want video games to make me feel? And honestly, I think that question explains a lot more. So now I want to throw the question to you. What genres do you usually love? Which ones do you avoid? And after hearing all this, do you see your taste a little differently now? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd genuinely love to hear your take.